I survived what will forever be etched in my memory as the worst boat tour imaginable, an ill-fated excursion that continues to haunt my thoughts like a specter on a still night. The sensation creeps into my mind after dusk falls, reminding me of how the sun blazed mercilessly against the shimmering surface of that lake, blighting an otherwise promising day. I never anticipated that my anticipation of a leisurely boat ride would transform into an encounter with something so bizarrely horrifying lurking just beneath the placid waters. What was meant to be a simple exploration morphed into a nightmarish ordeal, unearthing a sinister truth about the world cloaked in its tranquil facade. It all kicked off on a crisp summer morning, the kind of day that calls to your spirit and invites you to step outside. The air was lively with the sweet scent of blooming wildflowers and the unmistakable hum of nature awaking, promising adventure and filled with laughter. I found myself amongst a small gathering of strangers, all face lit with eagerness at the thought of embarking on a picturesque boat ride through the heart of the shimmering lake that glistened below the brilliant sun. The boat was modest, gently weathered, bearing worn wooden benches and a coat of paint that peeled away like old memories. My heart was light as a feather, buoyed by the excitement bubbling within me. Water had always been my refuge, my solace, but that day, there was a sense of darkness lurking just beneath every inconspicuous ripple. As we drifted away from the shore, the guide charmed us with tales of folklore and the rich history of the area. He wove stories about explorers spirited by ambition and the legends of lost treasures beneath the depths. Laughter danced across the water, buoyed back to the land we left behind, a sound that resonated with joy in my heart. Yet, I sensed that this peace was superficial, as thin as the whispers of the wind weaving through the trees. Soon, the tale shifted, almost imperceptibly, toward the unsettling murmurs of towns swallowed by time, inhabitants disappearing without leaving a trace. A chill swept through me, piercing the sun-drenched euphoria as thick, ominous clouds began to obscure the azure sky, casting a shroud of unease across our small group. I dismissed it at first, thinking it was just a fleeting storm passing me by. Anxiety began to creep into my heart, dulled only by the longing for this adventure I had craved. I scarcely noticed when the familiarity of the shore faded into a memory, soon lost to the remoteness that enveloped us as we meandered deeper into the lake's embrace. Time stretched and warped like the restless water around us, turning hours into what felt like mere minutes, or was it merely one singular hour? Questions clutched at my mind, a tumultuous tide of uncertainty. Each creak of the boat echoed ominously among the increasing stillness, the water around us taking on an eerie quality. The chatter softened to uneasy murmurs, punctuated by a hollow laughter that rang out discordantly. I spotted a man leaning uncomfortably at the bow, his gaze fixed far into the horizon. When our eyes met, I shivered. There was an unsettling depth in his stare, as if he emanated the shadows lurking within his thoughts. And then, it happened. My recollection of the event is so vivid that I can still detect the pungent scent of decay twisting around my senses, that cloying aroma ingrained in my mind years later. Something aquatic, dark and forlorn, drifted into view, a shape reminiscent of shadows woven from tales of despair. As it drew closer, a quiver of unease rippled through our small assembly, a palpable tension that blanketed the air. The guide, attempting to dispel our muted fear, clumsily joked that it was merely debris lost in time, but I could feel a gnawing instinct affirming that it was anything but. As we approached, the shadow unveiled itself, a grotesque bundle tightly ensconced in fabric, bobbing with an unnerving ease against the gentle current. The sight was harrowing, like a grotesque twist from a horror movie brought vividly to life. Yet here it floated in unadulterated daylight, an unmistakable figure, unnaturally still, unervingly serene, blighted by the macabre. Panic surged through my veins like ice water. I was not prepared for this ordeal, not one of us had been. The calm composure that had graced the man at the prow shattered, replaced by raw dread. The guide's complexion drained to a sickly pallor, and in that singular heartbeat, the world unraveled, shattered by a silent scream. Laughter dissipated entirely, evaporating into the endlessly stretching horizon. We were marooned, rendered impotent under the weight of horror, all alone on a vast expanse of water that transformed from tranquil to nightmarish in an instant. I tasted the brine of fear on my lips, felt its tendrils clawing through my veins like fire. There were no words, we were woven together within the fabric of shared realization, a truth that thickened the air around us, the unambiguous acknowledgement that something dreadful had transpired. Before I could wrestle my spiraled thoughts into coherence, the guide wrenched the boat around, steering away from the ghastly apparition as if it carried within it the curse of the ages. The engine roared to life, expelling the inky silence and tearing us further from the haunting sight. But as we fled, darkness eclipsed us, deeper and more profound than the shadows beneath our drifting vessel, the very skies eclipsed by the looming storm. The water churned with a life of its own, alive and oppressive, trembling beneath us. Our retreat, however, was met with hostility, the lake erupting into chaos as a storm surged upon us, winds that swept our small boat into a wild frenzy. My fingers tightened their grip on the damp edge as the waves lashed around us, hungry and voracious. Shrieks erupted, a chorus of despair that harmonized with the sky unleashing its fury, drowning out every desperate plea for safety. The world spun, a waltz of fear and adrenaline, with hope diminished among the crashing waves. Amidst the frenzy, a voice broke through the tumult, barking orders, shouting about life jackets, emergency protocols. But in that moment, those protocols felt as impotent as whispers lost in the gales of the storm. My heart raced, drumming an angry tattoo against my chest as we careened through the maelstrom. Every thrash against the water wrested away the semblance of calm. With each wave, an instinctive urge to flee ignited my senses, raw and primal, begging me to fight against the tides of fate. But like all tempests, it retreated, dissolving into memories as swiftly as it roared into existence. We emerged, shaken and bloodied but alive, the world transformed before our eyes. The familiar outline of the shore was replaced with an alien vista, an endless expanse of gray water that stretched infinitely, taunting us with its emptiness. Our devices flickered, GPS signals sputtering out like dying stars, leaving us to grapple with a growing tide of despair gnawing at our very spirits. Panic once again surfaced, coiling within my gut. Amidst this gathering storm of anxiety and confusion, my gaze drifted back to the man with the haunted eyes, the sentinel of our shared terror. He met my gaze, and in that moment, a revelation pierced the fog of dread. He understood too. His expression mirrored my own horror, binding us in a shared acknowledgement of the darkness that threatened to devour us whole. I struggled to distance myself from the realization, but it clung to me like dampness against my skin, an unwelcome shroud of comprehension. Before the rising tide of despair could lap at my heels, I caught sight of land in the distance, a silhouette that teetered on the brink of imagination and reality. A flicker of hope ignited inside me as we navigated closer, the outlines of trees and an old ramshackle dock emerging from the mist obscuring our view. When we finally reached solid ground, shadows danced along the edge of vision, with figures peering out from behind the veil of the trees, their faces warped by shadows, steeped in strange detachment. They watched us as if they've awaited our arrival, as if they knew our story before we even stepped ashore. With each unsteady step onto the dock, the chill deepened, pulsing with a sinister cadence. Silence reigned, unspoken words draping over us like a damp cloth. Awkward glances flickered between my fellow passengers as I felt something cold press against my ankle, a shiver igniting along my spine. A creeping faint recognition coiled its way through the depths of my mind as I moved past those dark figures lining the dock. The sun's warmth all but extinguished, replaced by an oppressive chill that snuffed out any semblance of solidarity. I didn't realize how lost we had become until I turned back to glance at the lake, and to my horror, those figures on the dock seemed much closer now, encroaching from the shadows. Suddenly, a terrifying epiphany struck me like a rogue wave. They weren't merely strangers who had witnessed our arrival. No, they were our inevitable fate, the shadows of those who had come before, tied to the depths we couldn't escape. A sense of panic ignited every fiber of my being, compelling me to flee, to escape from whatever madness gripped this place. Adrenaline surged as I turned on my heel, racing back toward the boat, desperate to find the guide, frantically imploring the universe for a swift escape from the clasp of this malevolent entity. And in that instant, it dawned on me, the most horrifying truth of all. The terror of being ensnared is often more profound than anything that could haunt your waking life. We had survived the storm, but something deeply irrevocable had begun to fester within my soul. I never returned to that water, but an incessant part of me feels its ominous pull, a siren song beckoning me to gaze once more beneath its bewitched surface. For anyone who has ever felt something lurking beneath the calm, an entity that refuses to release its grip, this channel might be meant for you. Subscribe to The Dark Witness. You'll understand why. Because occasionally, the most terrifying episodes unfold under the harsh illumination of daylight, surrounded by the water, entrapments of hopelessness closing in without a discernible escape. And sometimes they pursue you home.